and they were obsessed with the movie Gymkhana, which is like such an American thing. So these Taiwanese gangsters didn't feel Taiwanese at all, but they're supposed to be from Taiwan. Hey everybody, my name is Nick. I'm a director and editor, and today I'm going to be talking about the Netflix series, The Brother's Son. Brother's Son came out this year. It stars Michelle Yeoh. Now on paper, this series seems to have a lot of legs, seems like it would be pretty popular. But it was recently announced that it would not be renewed for a second season. So I just want to explore why that may be, because most of the people that I know who watched this series expressed enjoyment. And personally, I did find it to be a pretty good show. Certainly not the best show, but better than many shows that I've seen on streaming recently. I do think there are some important flaws in the series, however, and I don't know if these are the reason that it wasn't renewed, but I want to explore maybe some possible things that could have caused this to not really catch. I want to say that the framing of this show as not being renewed that I saw in like Variety or somewhere was pretty odd. Not everything needs multiple seasons, especially now on the streaming shows where everything comes out at once. It's kind of a standalone product as a season. The presentation now of these streaming shows seems to be that every show should be renewed or else it's a failure. But I think that creators and services shouldn't frame their series like that. Not every show needs to be renewed. And I think Brother's Son in particular tied up all its loose ends. And if the series was presented as a standalone piece that maybe could be renewed down the line, or choose to walk off into the sunset and just like have this be it, that would be fine, and that would frame this show as a success. If we're framing this show as a failure because it wasn't renewed for a second season, that makes the prospect of doing a similar show in the future less likely to investors. They can use this as an example of like, well, we don't want to invest in this show because look at The Brother's Son. But if we frame this show as this was a standalone piece, it got a certain number of viewers that we're happy with that, you know, this piece is what it is and it's good, people liked it, that's a better framing, I think. And so it's an unrealistic expectation that we're setting that everything could be or should be renewed. A show like Beef is a good example of how to do that correctly, where it's kind of self-contained. And there wasn't an expectation that Beef was going to have a season 2. You know, the creator of it was like, I don't know if I want to do a season 2. I think there might be a season 2, but it's not an expectation, and Beef is seen as a resounding success. Brother's Son, I think, should have done that, and I don't like the framing of, oh, it was canceled for season 2. There are problems with the show, and I think that we can explore maybe why it's not as successful as it feels like it should have. The budget and the audience numbers are, of course, always going to be the ultimate reason why a show doesn't get renewed. So probably what happened is the budget of this show appears to be very big. It seems like they spent a lot of money on it. The audience that it got probably didn't hit a certain level, right? That just seems like common sense. So what's the reason that the audience didn't hit a certain level? Well, I think probably the main problem with the show from an audience retention standpoint is that it gets better as the episodes go on. Now, this made the show enjoyable to watch for me. I actually liked it because as I stuck with it, every episode got progressively more interesting as the characters and the plot developed. But I will say that the first episode for me was probably the least engaging of the whole show. The fighting, the storyline, the acting felt the most cliched in this episode, and I actually didn't really want to continue watching it after the first episode. I was like, okay, I think I get it. This is not really for me. I don't want to do it. I kept watching it because I wanted to do a review on it, though. It kind of makes sense that maybe a lot of people had the same reaction where they watched the first episode, they're like, okay, I get it. I don't need to finish this. And I think that is a good lesson for creators to kind of front load the interesting stuff. But it's also kind of a sad commentary on the way that television and things are experienced these days, where you can't have a slow build like that. I think for this show, it kind of worked. The character of Charles, who's first introduced, starts as like this one-dimensional triad, badass, John Wick-like character. And he's cliched, that's who he is. He's kind of like a wooden person. The process of the show is him breaking down his walls and slowly playing against this type of this criminal and like learning to love his family and stuff. So it needs to have that slow build. He has an arc, and I think that's a good thing about the show, but it also might be the reason why in the beginning the show's not that interesting, because the character doesn't get interesting until later. I believed every part of the show that was about the Asian American experience. The way they discussed life in America, Bruce's relationship with his mother and his family, little details that they put in about like certain LA restaurants and bakeries that are good. You know, you can tell they know about all this stuff. A very authentic part of the show is when the mother is gonna go back to Taiwan and she visits Costco and she buys all these American products to bring back to Taiwan as gifts. I mean, it's very standard practice for people returning home to Taiwan. And this all felt authentic and important cultural details that were mixed into the show. Taiwan triads, nobody knows exactly how it's structured. It doesn't have to be real, like a real Taiwan triad, but so many of the Taiwanese triad members from Taiwan weren't native speaking. You know, the worst were the Shongdi that come later in the show. They don't speak any Chinese or Taiwanese, which is probably what they would be speaking as a Taiwanese gangster. You know, and they were obsessed with the movie Jim Cotta, which is like such an American thing. So these Taiwanese gangsters didn't feel Taiwanese at all, but they're supposed to be from Taiwan coming over to help him. You know, there's a real missed opportunity for me. The Taiwanese gangsters wouldn't be watching Jim Cotta. They would be obsessed with like a Stephen Chow movie or like a Hong Kong B movie. These are the movies that play on Taiwan TV at night. And that's another interesting thing you could introduce culturally to people that they wouldn't know about. And I think the real important thing here is that when you have this authenticity in the Asian American experience that feels very real, and then you contrast it with these kind of weird things for the Taiwan experience of the Taiwanese people, it sticks out as false. If we're doing all fantasy, I mean, it doesn't have to be that way, but if we're doing all fantasy and it's all whatever and we're just making things fun, then it's okay. But the way that this show is structured, where you have some things that are very, I felt like it was important to the creators that they did things authentically and showed you these real things. Then when it comes to this stuff and you're having these Taiwanese gangsters watching Jim Cotta, that really sticks out as very odd. I think the worst example of it is the young Charles. They have a flashback and the actor that was playing young Charles had a pretty obviously labored Chinese accent. Like he was not a native speaker, the worst in the show. Other ones, I think you can kind of get by, but he was really, it was bad. And no offense, actor. But, you know, this character of Charles is supposed to have been born and raised in Taiwan. He is like Taiwanese all the way through. He doesn't know about stuff in America. He's like, the whole thing, the concept of the show is he's fish out of water in LA. Whoa, America's so crazy. It's so different than Taiwan. And then you have this character as a kid, can barely speak Chinese. And, you know, it's a problem because this show spends a lot of money and energy in its fight choreography, making the fight scenes look authentic. Why aren't we spending that effort and that energy into the language skills, into the casting, finding a kid who is a native speaker? We could have done that. We definitely could have done that. You know, and perhaps, I mean, certainly the reason is that less people can recognize bad Chinese, but I think it's more important and recognizable than you think. It's a big oversight because if this show had maintained its authenticity in this area, in the language, in the depiction of the Taiwanese elements of the show, then I think it has the potential to really bridge barriers between audiences in the West and audiences in Taiwan. And the Taiwan viewers who watch the show won't feel as alienated. They'll feel like, hey, this is my show too. And when you mess it up like that, in a way where you're signaling that this is supposed to be accurate, and you mess it up, it grates on people. For me and for Sonia, who is Taiwanese, the placement of certain things just felt wrong and were annoying. Like the way that the characters sweared, like the gangster characters sweared in the show. Like there's a character who really has this forced insertion of this swear mada, and he would say it at weird times like mada, and it's like an unnatural time to say that, and it really sticks out if you know that that's not when it's supposed to be said. And then there's other times that the show kind of nails it perfectly, and there's a scene I'm thinking of specifically where one of the characters badly cooks tomato egg stir fry, right? And Charles, who is a really good cook, is watching her do it, and he's kind of telling her like, no, the heat on the eggs has to be softer. And it's an experience that if you know how to cook this specific Taiwanese dish, tomato egg stir fry, you know exactly how she's failing at making it. And it reveals a lot about the characters in a funny way. It contrasts Charles and this woman in a funny, interesting way. And it shows us, it really is seamlessly inserted this kind of cultural stuff. And that is when the show does it really well. And it's kind of a funny metaphor because it's a little bit like what's happening with the show, where you have the tomato egg stir fry and they're got all the elements and they kind of know how to make it, but they're just turning the heat up just a little bit too much and the eggs are going to be overcooked and it's just not going to taste right. And that's, I think, a little bit what happened with this show. And I think that that is the main issue I had with The Brother's Son, is that it's hit and miss. You know, some of the acting was really great. Michelle Yeoh is fantastic. There's a scene when she gets in a crazy fight and right after Bruce comes in and then she has to snap right back into mom mode and you can see her masking her emotions, trying to be strong. It's a great scene. She acts it perfectly. And as somebody who had a single mother, it felt so real to me. So they do these little things really well. But then there's other scenes where Charles, the actor who played Charles, is speaking entirely in monotone, trying to deliver this like serious emotional moment. And you can tell that really all he cares about is like yelling and screaming and fighting. And that's what that actor wants to do. And it makes those scenes kind of drag. So the acting can be pretty bad sometimes. Story-wise, you know, I think that it was hit or miss again. It scratches the surface of a really interesting concept about how triads are not great. Triads are smuggling in people, and they do a cool thing where the people that you think are the bad guys actually are the ones that end up having this really righteous cause of wanting to end the triads, wanting to stop human trafficking. And Bruce kind of comes around and kind of in a way has to betray his family because he wants to get his family out of the gang. This is subverting our expectation of like a triad show where the triads are this kind of noble, great thing. It stops short of actually fully delivering that message because in the end, spoiler, in the end our heroes decide to stay in the gang. They decide to make the triad good. And it just felt trite and false and just a cop-out. And it almost went somewhere, but it kind of didn't go all the way. And I think this goes full circle to the problem with the show, which is that they wanted to write the show with the idea of needing a second season. I do think that there's some good stuff in this show. I hope that the lack of a season 2 doesn't discourage producers from taking a chance on producing shows that are for America, but portray connections to Taiwan, to Asia. I just hope that these kinds of portrayals can continue and get stronger because I do think that audiences want to see this stuff. They want to see these interesting different cultures that they don't know about. I keep saying this word authenticity and it matters to people. Hopefully people don't criticize me for me talking about what's authentic Taiwan, but you know, I did live there for a while. If I'm wrong, tell me I'm wrong, but I think I'm right about like the Chinese is bad and this stuff. So I think I'm right, you know. But you know, if you want to complain, hey, everybody likes to complain on YouTube. It's a free country, as they say, as is Taiwan. All right. I will catch you guys in the next one. Let me know in the comments. Get mad at me. Tell me I'm dumb. I don't, though. It hurts my feelings. Love you guys. See you next time.